Liberty must, at all hazards, be supported. We have the right to it, derived from our Maker. But if we had not, our fathers have earned and bought it for us at the expense of their ease, their estates, their pleasure, and their blood. John Adams, 1765. Without liberty, law loses its nature and its name. It becomes oppression. Without law, liberty also loses its nature and its name. It becomes licentiousness. That is James Wilson, The Study of Law in the United States, 1790. In Europe, charters of liberty have been granted by power. America has set the example of charters of power granted by liberty. This revolution in the practice of the world may, with an honest praise, be pronounced the most triumphant echo of its history and the most consoling passage of its happiness. That is James Madison, 1792. Let's look here really quickly. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution of the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. That is James Madison, The Federalist, 45, 1788. The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively to the people. The 10th Amendment. I consider the foundation of the Constitution as laid on the ground that all powers not delegated to the United States, that would be the federal government, by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states or to the people. To take a single step beyond the boundaries thus specifically drawn around the powers of Congress is to take possession of a boundless field of power not longer susceptible of any definition. Thomas Jefferson, 1791. Welcome, folks. This is AllMinucOne. My name is Bill. Please, if you like my content, hit that like button, share, subscribe, put a comment down below. I'll probably like your comment or comment back or whatever. We can have a conversation. I like conversations. So, before we get into the topic of the day, I wanted you all to know that I brought this up by no haphazard effort, if you would. I brought this up because this is completely and utterly ignored today within our government and by the people themselves. We have forgotten where we come from. And make no mistakes that many people will give you platitudes about the Constitution. They will say things that are completely irrelevant to what the Constitution is and what it stands for and how it should be followed, and yet pretend to be champions of said document. Well, the reality is the Constitution limits the power of the federal government, and the states are their own nations. And together we are a larger nation. This has not changed, other than down here, as Jefferson stated, that if those boundaries were broken, that they would be boundless with power and no longer susceptible by any definition. That is, susceptible to bounds. And the reason why I bring this up is because I want to talk about, I really want to talk about China. China. God, if you love or hate the president, I mean, he is fun to make fun of. He is quite funny. Look, we have a country that is in deep peril right now. And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I understand that it will probably go on. But we have the faction of the deep state who are globalists. And those globalists wish to essentially placate you and erode away the power of the states and the local governments. And they wish to have a unified authority over everybody. Perhaps you like that, but it doesn't work out too well for the people. It only can lead to tyranny. And make no mistake, we have tyranny in the United States. We have all kinds of tyranny. We've had it for decades, a century, because we don't pay attention to the Constitution, because we wish to move leftward towards progress. And unfortunately, folks, that is not progress. It is regress. I promise you. You see, the classical liberals, they understood what progress was. Progress was freeing mankind from the bonds of servitude, from slavery, from authority as much as possible so that he or she could go about and live your life as much as possible. And that will bring me to what I wish to talk about today, and that is China. And I wanted to cover this actually the other week, but I just didn't get around to it. You know, I try my best to get at least 3 videos out a week, and I've been doing the quick shots, and of course I have family duties and whatever else, other obligations. In fact, I need to install a garbage disposal sometime this week, or sometime soon at least. So this is a little old. This is from September 6th, but today is the 16th, so we're talking about 10 days ago, and there were riots in Hong Kong, mass riots. There was craziness. People were snatched up in the streets. It says here, Ryan Ho Kilpatrick, one police line, Nathan Road. The pavement is packed with people walking north chanting protest slogans, including the now banned Liberty Hong Kong revolution of our time. So the importance of this is that these people were actually suppressed. Hong Kong was of sorts its own free nation because of its freedom and because of its free markets. And I mean highly free. It has been one of the greatest economic centers of the world. This happened because of traditional American type ideals under British rule. The people of Hong Kong love their freedom. They become very prosperous, and China wants to control them. They don't like freedom. Now, you could argue that certain provinces of China have a lot of freedom themselves, but they're very rural, mountainous, and poor. It's not the same thing. Also, if you get out of line, make no mistakes, the Chinese government will snatch you up, as all communist fascistic regimes do. Excuse me. It says, kettled on Nathan between Saigon and Ningpo after a blue flag was raised near the student politics members were giving out face masks. Most journalists were allowed out after checking our press passes, but some reporters, either students or from small outlets, were retained, meaning the police grabbed up the reporters, even though they had press passes. This is not like someone out on the streets, such as Elijah Schaffer, who is giving or doing live footage and doesn't necessarily have a press pass on them, and the police arrest them during protest. That doesn't happen too often in the United States, but it does happen. It certainly happens. But here we just said Bedlam breaks out as Shantung Street in Mong Kong. Mong Kong is an area of Hong Kong. After uncovered police posing as protesters tackled several people to the ground and pepper sprayed the crowd. So you can see this. You can see how these police as well are not very well marked. They essentially blend into the crowds. And as they do this, see if I can zoom in on this just a little bit more. So, as they do this, you can see people were throwing bottles at them or whatever, but mostly people were just going about in their own way. But if you recall, folks, before the Wuhan lab exposure, now obviously these are more riot police. Yeah. If you remember, before all of the Wuhan virus stuff came out, right, there were just dozens and dozens of riots, or not even riots, but protests going on in Hong Kong, and the Chinese authorities were coming into them. And you could say they were riots, or they became that way because the people were actually resisting. They were fighting for their freedoms. This is not at all what's going on in the U.S. Looting and burning things down is not fighting for your freedoms. That's called being a thug. These are legitimate people wanting to have their lives free. And you see these police here basically telling businesses to close or do whatever they're doing. It says, Hong Kong is being fought for block by block as riot police sweep through, nabbing some and cordoning off dozens for processing. Many caught in their crosshairs attempt to find shelter in nearby shops, which is, like I said, why the shops are starting to have their doors and whatnot closed. It says, everyone trapped inside the stores is now being convoyed, patted down, and having their badges searched. So they're now invading the stores looking for people who were protesting. Again, this is not what's going on in the United States. In the United States, the protesters and their riots of peace are burning and looting these buildings down. Very, very different scenarios. Blue flag raised by police again outside a store and Sayun Choi Street, in which they searching people who sought shelter there after the crowd began chanting anti-police slogans. I'll turn the volume up for this one. Now, I don't speak Chinese, so I don't know what he's saying, but apparently that's the chant. Although I did learn Chinese some years ago. I trained Wing Chun Kung Fu for a long time, and when you train Wing Chun Kung Fu, then you're basically speaking everything in Chinese. So, in any case, just fun fact there. It says, police closing in from all sides. It's impossible to leave Hong Kong now without passing through a police line. Again, Hong Kong is an area within Hong Kong. It is a neighborhood, if you would. So there's that police line. There's that police line again. The only good way to conclude this thread. Very nice. Very nice. So, let's see here. From Jesse Pang. Hundreds of protesters took to the streets in Hong Kong on Sunday to demonstrate against new national security law imposed by China and the postponement of legislative elections. Now, this was the big thing that happened. They decided that they were not going to have the elections because the centralized authority in China that is run by the Han Chinese, that is the Communist Party, they decided that Hong Kong was not going to have their proper elections. This was, again, on September 6th. You can see here the riot police with a microphone. I believe that's attached to a megaphone here, and a paintball gun. It says Hong Kong police fire pepper balls at protesters opposed to election delays. So that was from Reuters UK. Thousands of police were stationed around the bustling Kwanlon Peninsula as marches waved placards and chanted protest slogans such as "Liberate Hong Kong, Revolution of Our Time." These slogans are now banned under the national security law. So they have banned their free speech. Now, as this authoritarian regime moves in, these people will disappear. They will go to re-education camps, the gulags, if you will. May I remind you that the Antifa BLM people who are out in the streets right now, most of them are useful idiots, but their leadership talk about these things that they want to do to Americans who do not agree with them. May I also remind you that these people are saying on the progressive left that you cannot have unlimited free speech. May I remind you that they are all collectivists. May I remind you that they are not forces for good. And if you have politics that align with them, you may want to reconsider your positions. And you're probably not listening to me. But if you would be listening to me, you may want to understand something that is very important. They will come for you. Make no mistake of it. They will come after you if they do not like what you have to say at any point in time. And you are propping this up and allowing it. It's time to drop the teams, people. It's time to stand up for liberty. See, I'm not here talking about these issues because I care about Republicans or Democrats. I've cared about that for 15 years. It's nonsense. Now, do I align more with Republicans most often? Yes. Why is that? Because outside of the neocons, outside of those old rhinos, outside of those war hawks, I believe in the basic founding principles of the United States, like the quotes I just read to you at the beginning of this video. So let's move on. Protesters also chanted a new slogan, "I want my voting right," and various placards to protest against the postponement of the Legislative Council elections. Today is supposedly our voting day. We need to resist the fight back for our vote, said a 70-year-old woman, surname Wong. And here it says, the vote is precious, almost sacred. It is the most powerful non-violent tool we have in a democratic society. I disagree. The most powerful tool you have is speech. Justin Martyr, who got that title, martyr, because he was basically considered one of the first Christian martyrs. He was the first Christian apologist from the 2nd century. Justin Martyr said that our Lord does not allow us to fight with tools, with hands, with physical violence, but the only violence that we are allowed to have, that is, as Christians, is through speech. That we are allowed to use violence with our speech. Now, obviously, speech is not violence like the progressives would like to trick you. But see, they say, your speech hurt my feelings, therefore you were violent toward me, I get to hit you. Well, two can play at that game. That's just a might makes right. And I am really disgusted with their speech all the time. So why does that not justify me to do violence, and I mean real violence, to them? Justin Martyr said, the only violence that our Lord allows is through speech. Dictatorial regime must pay for its evil acts. Here it says, we come here to raise awareness toward the 12 Hong Kongers being detained in China. They were banned from seeing their lawyers, and it's an infringement of human rights. We urge the government to send them back to Hong Kong, said the Satine District Councilor, what's that, Shu Chu Pong. Hope I pronounced that correctly, but is what it is. I do tend to do better with Asian names than many other names, especially Slavic names, quite difficult. Here it says, police arrested several activists during the demonstration, including Figo Chan and the vice governor of the Civil Rights Front, former legislator Luing Kwang Hong, who also has long hair, and whomever else, but you get the point. According to the police Facebook page, at least 30 people were arrested in today's march for unlawful assembly, including one arrested for breaching national security law by chanting Hong Kong independence-related slogans. Again, arrested for speech, wanting to be free. You don't know how good you have it. And I believe that's the end of the thread. There's a couple other photos. Yeah. So from Galileo Chin, League of Social Democrats protest outside Easton Hotel. Or Eaton Hotel, sorry. Another round of pepper ball fire. Now these are just still photos. Random snatch and catch as the guy keeps yelling, "I just walked by." Now I'm going to show you a video of some of that. Bring this up. China arrested 12 reportedly fleeing to Taiwan. You can't just leave China without permission. So Taiwan isn't part of China. The Chinese hate that because Taiwan does not consider themselves part of China, but the Chinese government certainly does. It's quite a strange thing. This Chiron says cracking down on the Uyghur abuse. I'm going to actually cover that and get to that here in a little bit, and what is going on with that. No, I do not. I do not have anything against Muslims. I don't agree with the origins of their religion and other things, but that's just a belief. I mean, I have issues with Catholicism as well, especially the papacy specifically. But these people have the right to be and believe and worship however they wish. And the Chinese government is taking them and putting them in concentration camps. They are castrating them to some degree. They are doing numerous things that are quite wicked. And if you have covered this at all, which our mainstream media is doing very little of, obviously this is on Fox, but let's see what the date was. It's recent, September 15th there. But there's just not a lot of talk about it out there. There's not a lot of talk about these protests. In fact, I only knew about these protests because I search and do the research that I do and find interesting things, of course, quite often through Twitter, because that is where the real journalism is going on now. Now here it says a 12-year-old girl scared ran and pushed down by riot police in Hong Kong. And yeah. Watch this. She just bolts. Now you might say, why are all those grown men on that 12-year-old girl? Well, that 12-year-old girl's pretty tiny, and it's hard to get a hold of somebody sometimes. Most of you might think that because you've never wrestled with anybody. If you haven't seen it, I cannot remember the journalist's name, but there was I believe it was Jessica something, but anyways, I think she works for Blaze. But on Twitter, there was a video about two cops who pulled over a gentleman and tried to wrestle him out of the car, and they finally did, got the door shut behind him. They already tased him, and they pepper sprayed him. Now, I can tell you right now, I've been pepper sprayed numerous times because of my former professions. You can fight through it. A lot of people it doesn't affect. And in fact, we train to fight through it because when you pepper spray, especially in a correctional environment and it's aerosol, you're going to get it. You're going to get it. I've seen a lot of men cry like grown babies about it, but generally speaking, as far as us and our job and our side, we still have to work. But I've also been tased. And I can tell you, it is not fun. It's very painful. It's like it's a very severe muscle spasm. But it doesn't affect some people. It depends on where those prongs are deployed or where it's at. If you do a drive stun, where you're putting the weapon directly on somebody, it's only going to hit that one area. It doesn't feel good, but it is no guarantee. Before having those tools, or bean bags and pepper balls and all that other stuff that they use now in riot control, we just had cops out there with batons like these and guns. So you have to understand that there's levels, but you can only do so much. But anyways, back to this gentleman that was wrestling with these, or fighting with these people. He kept crying and complaining and whatever, and then he finally pulls a gun. And he shot both cops, and I think only one survived. He shot the one cop in the head. And it's pretty horrifying. But you need to understand the realities. And this is why the idea of defunding the police is silly. Now, in that case specifically, my critique would have been those the police officers should have had backup. They should have had a second unit on scene the moment that person was resistant. But that's just me. So anyways, yeah, I think that was the main thing I wanted to bring up there. Here we go again with Galileo Chin. And plainclothes police stopped and grabbed protesters via Resistance Live. I kind of showed you this already, but you see these police are in there to blend in. We have nothing like this in the United States. So, is this covered in the mainstream media? Well, sort of. September 7, 2020, CNN, 300 arrested in Hong Kong protest over postponed local elections. Hong Kong police arrested 289 at protest over elections. This is Al Jazeera. Interesting that I have to go to Al Jazeera, by the way. I mean, I don't have to because I had CNN there, but I really don't like to use the most trusted name in news because they're a bunch of liars. They're a bunch of propagandists. So let's go here. This is from the South China Morning Post. You guys should read this on the regular. You should at least check out the headlines. Know what's going on in the world. Know what's going on in the world. What's important. Hong Kong protesters, at least 289 arrested as scatter groups heated online calls to rally on postpone election day. Heavy police presence continues into the late evening hours after officers used pepper balls and pepper spray against protesters. Hong Kongers were supposed to be casting their votes on Sunday to choose lawmakers for the next term, but elections were postponed due to health crisis. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the health crisis. It's the same reason, the same excuse here in the United States that the Democrats are currently using with mail-in voting. Interestingly, I saw an ad the other day on YouTube, which was quite amusing, talking about, Trump and his people, they're hypocrites because they mail-in vote. No, they absentee voted. It's not the same thing as blanket ballot sending to everyone. Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx both said that we could vote in person. Obviously, if you can go to Walmart, if you can go to the grocery store, if we can eat in restaurants, we can go vote, folks. We can go vote in person. Of course, I believe in voter ID because I'm not a racist, and I think that, black people and other minorities can get IDs. In fact, I know that they can get them because that's how they drive and buy alcohol and stuff like that. That's how they get into, bars and whatever else. But, imagine not having the soft bigotry of low expectations and assuming that all minorities are of lesser capability than us glorious whites. Newsweek. I wanted to pull this up. This just happened last night. Tucker Carlson had this virologist. Can I speak right now? No. Speaking is not going to happen. Anyways, Twitter suspended account of Chinese virologist. There we go. I could say it that way. Who claim coronavirus was made in the lab. Now, This is important because that went against WHO. Can't go against the WHO because, it's not like they lied about human-to-human transmission. Look, I've already done stuff on this. I'm not going to get into the weeds of all this. But this lady said that it was essentially a man-made virus that was leaked by the government. Now, was it or was it not? I don't know. But what I do know is that the Western media propaganda left-wing progressive apparatus has been trying to say, oh, this was completely natural causes. This is why it was blamed on the wet market. This is why the Washington Post did this video, which I'm not going to play with any sound, but they will show a few things here talking about the virus. They have a bunch of, virologists, now I can say it. And they talk about how the virus was likely to come from a pig, and we've seen it before, and there's no way that it could have come from the lab. It was just a naturally occurring thing. Yeah, it's a bunch of nonsense. So let's see. If you guys want to watch this, this is on YouTube. Did coronavirus accidentally escape from a Wuhan lab? It's doubtful. The fact checker. Well, I don't think so, man, because you know what's going on? And by the way, this is highly ratioed last time I looked. Well, it has some likes, has some dislikes. That also goes to show you what the division in the country is. But let's talk about this for a second. So I forget what it is. There's something like 20 known coronaviruses, or 19 or something like that. Why it's COVID-19, or I forget it. Or COVID-19 was named after the year, one or the other. There's about 7 that we know of that cause colds. There were SARS and MERS, of course, that were far more lethal than this, but just did not spread as quickly. I think that this thing that is happening is a lot of hooey, obviously, for a lot of reasons. It only affects a certain kind of population. Now, we do have a lot of obese people in the United States, so there will be people that die because of that. But in general, I showed you a thing the other day on my quick shots that people, I believe, of the age of 50 to 65 have a 1 in 19 million chance of being hospitalized or dying from this thing. Now, that's in a more elderly population, or a population that's going to be at a higher risk for things like heart disease. And that was from Stanford and the University of California, Berkeley, if I'm not mistaken. So the idea here that the whistleblower is saying is that it was made in a lab and released on purpose. Maybe. It was probably a lab disease, though. It probably was. There has been a lot of speculation on this. And the reason why is because they had level 4 containment. And what they do with these viruses is they try to make them super strong and super powerful to try and learn how to make vaccines for them for other viral infections. The only problem with this is there is no vaccine for any sort of coronavirus ever. There never has been. For 10 years, they worked on one for SARS, if I'm not mistaken, and that never came to fruition. So you have to understand what this is. There will be, mark my words, there will be no vaccine. And if there is, it will not be effective. It'll be like the flu vaccine at best, which has like a 50-50 chance of working. Like literally. Maybe 60-40, something like that. And they do it all on a guess. And just because that certain flu strain that they think is coming out doesn't mean that it's going to be the one that you catch. So keep all of that in mind when trying to understand all this. So let's talk some more about China, though, in general. So U.S. charges 5 Chinese nationals, 2 Malaysians, and hacking of more than 100 targets. The targets include telecommunications companies, universities, think tanks, and pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong, says U.S. Justice Department. The Malaysian nationals were arrested by Malaysian authorities on Monday. Let's just read just a little bit of this. The U.S. Department of Justice announced charges against 5 Chinese and 2 Malaysian nationalists on Wednesday in the hacking of more than 100 targets in the U.S. and elsewhere. Okay, well, we just read that, right? The Department of Justice has used every tool available to disrupt the illegal computer intrusions and cyber attacks by the Chinese citizens. Regrettably, the Chinese Communist Party has chosen a different path in making China safe for cyber criminals so long as they attack computers outside of China and steal intellectual property helpful to China. Again, understand what China is, what they do. These are just the kind of wars that we are in. Understand that the Chinese government has bought up just millions and millions and millions of acres of land all across the globe, in South America, in Africa, even over here in the United States. I've told you before in another video, we've caught Chinese nationalists moving with viral loads, with viruses contained through customs and the airports in the United States without claiming them. They got busted, they got caught, and they were like, oh, I didn't know that was with me. Sure you didn't. Why isn't that in the mainstream news? Why isn't that headline news? Why isn't the New York Times front page stuff? Why isn't it the Washington Post front page stuff? Well, I'll tell you why. Because there's a giant market over in China. It's always about follow the money. I'll tell you another reason why. They like the elitist, top-down, centralized control. They do. You can't deny that. Look, there was a scandal. I haven't delved into it, but there's been a little bit of scandal about the billionaires, those big guys. Remember, Jeff Bezos does run the Washington Post. I'm not saying because you're a billionaire, you're an evil person or anything. There are plenty, I'm sure, very nice billionaires and millionaires and billionaires, as the old Bernie would say. That's not the point. My point is the certain people want to be very influential. And look at Mike Bloomberg, for instance. I mean, the dude's so crazy, so authoritarian, he bans the size of soda you can get in New York City. And by the way, excuse me, New York did not do well under Bloomberg. Of course, it's done even worse under de Blasio, but they'll no doubt get some more left-winging progressive types in there. And just, I'm moving off to the mountains, guys. I'm buying a big plot of land. I'm going to live in a double wide for a while till we can build a nice house. I'm telling you, I'm getting away. I'm going to live off the land. Going to shoot me some deer. Going to have a nice garden. Going to be self-sustainable. These people, you people that just despise your liberty, you're evil and insane. Or maybe you're not evil. Maybe you're just misguided. But, that old road to hell saying, road to hell, right? Paved with good intentions. Anyways, let's get back to this South Chinese Post, China Post article again. It says the Justice Department said that one of the Chinese nationalists had boasted he was protected by the Chinese Minister of State Security. Some of these Chinese criminal actors believed their association with the People's Republic of China provided them free license to hack and steal across the globe. Acting U.S. Attorney Michael Sherwin said in a statement. The charges come as U.S.-China relations continue to unravel over the coronavirus pandemic. Trade war and human rights, with distrust between the two governments now higher as it has ever been in decades. Well, it should be. They're also, by the way, the Chinese government are doing military naval maneuvers in the South China Sea. So the South China Sea, all this is important because you have to realize all the freer economic centers around there. Obviously, there's South Korea. There's also Japan, of course. And then Hong Kong, until it's destroyed by China, and Taiwan, as well as all of the other Indochina type nations, Vietnam and the Pacific Islands there, the archipelago that is. this is not a good thing. And China they don't care. And they don't think like we think. Like, the Chinese government doesn't think like, oh, is this going to be, is this going to get me reelected, or is this going to get me this or that in the favor of the people? They don't think like that. They make 50 years, 100-year plans, and they think, what is our supremacy and power going to be in the near future? They've invested some ridiculous amount of money in their own infrastructure. Well, why would they do that? People speculate about it. Well, I could tell you why they're probably doing it. The same reason why we did it back in the 1950s and 60s. It was to help build up our military-industrial complex. It was so that we could move across the nation more quickly. Remember, all those national highways, those state and federal highways that you drive on all the time, were built for the military. And I can tell you, having been in the military, we use them. We use them all the time. We go from place to place. They transport goods and materials that way. They transport troops that way. You may not know where troops are going, but I can guarantee you they're going somewhere. I was stationed up in, so directly above my head, the security force unit that I was in was stationed in southern Maryland, and we were on a small naval base. Now, there wasn't any really good like ranges or anything around us. So we would go down into Virginia. We would go down to AP Hill, which is an army base, or we would go down to Quantico. And we would use the ranges there to either rifle qual or to do our infantry training, or we would go down, very familiar, unless, of course, it's been almost 20 years, but I'm very familiar with the little mount town that is the I don't even think they call it mount anymore, but military operations on urban terrain, that little facility, little fake town they have down there, because I have spent hundreds of hours down there shooting my buddies with sim rounds, and we were driving on the highways. Now, often we used a school bus, but that's a whole nother story. And we actually helped a buddy of ours pick up a girl once by doing the whole that whole Top Gun thing, You lost that love and feeling. But fun times, guys. Anyways, let's get back here to this. It says, artificial coronavirus study linked to Steve Bannon and Chinese fugitive Gao Wengui, I believe is how you would say that. I have to ask my daughter. She's learning Chinese. It says Guo-backed Rule of Law Foundation listed on non-peer review papers, title page, lead author of study is former University of Hong Kong, postdoctoral research. Now this relates to what I was just talking about with the lady that was on Tucker Carlson. Understand this. Hong Kong is going to make China look bad. All right? Because they're in an ideological war. I find this interesting that this is blurred. I don't know if it's because I have that on dark mode or not, but that's Steve Bannon and Guo. Anyways, it says the foundation associated with fugitive Chinese tycoon Guo Mingyu was former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon. Bannon was not in the White House very long, people, by the way. And I think Trump recognized very quickly that he was not the guy to deal with, as he often does. And that's one thing I love about him, man. Get rid of people who do not work for you well. Do it. I had a friend complain about that. Well, his administration is constantly going through people. Yes, because they're not doing the things that he needs done. I'm so happy he got rid of John Bolton. John Bolton is a freaking warmonger, man. Anyways, it says it's linked to non-peer review study that alleges the coronavirus is an artificial pathogen. It probably is, folks. It probably is. It doesn't mean that they released it on purpose. But you have to recall, I know you're Americans. Maybe you're listening to this internationally. But I know you're Americans and you have a very short memory. So going way back to January and February, the scientist that broke this story worked in that lab. And he disappeared and then he reappeared and died of the virus. That's China for you. It says the Rule of Law Foundation's name appears on the title page of the paper published by Zendo Open Access Research repository on Monday. In the paper's abstract, the researchers said the theory of natural origin of the coronavirus, although widely accepted, lacks substantial support. The alternative theory that the virus may have come from a research laboratory is, however, strictly censored on peer-reviewed scientific journals, it said. I would believe that. Like, absolutely, I'd believe that. Let's see what this says. The lab in Central China study that, yeah, that's what they do. They try to make these viruses so that they essentially are super strong, and then they try to defeat them with vaccines. This is what they do, and they do this also through animal testing, which does not usually pan out well for humans. You have to have human testing. Animal testing is not really. I mean, there's some things that might work on, but it's not really that great of a thing. Anyways, it continues to go on with all this. Go look this up yourself. This is, again, the South China Morning Post. So just so you can see that better. South China Morning Post. And, like, for today, this is right up on their headlines. Now, let's talk about the Uyghurs very quickly. This is from the Cato Institute back in July. Combating neo-Malthusianism, yeah. Mounting evidence shows that China has enacted wide-ranging human rights abuse, including coercive population control on this Uyghur minority. The Associated Press investigation released in late June showed that while China's rate of permanent sterilization procedures is falling nationally, the rate in Xinjiang, where many Uyghurs live, has skyrocketed. That's the province, by the way, Xinjiang. I believe I'm saying that right. Or Xinjiang. Forgive me, guys. Many of those surgeries were involuntary. Many Uyghur women are forcibly sterilized after having 2 children, as third children are illegal in China. The 2-child policy replaced China's previous 1-child policy. And this is a big reason why they have to re-educate the Uyghurs, because they're Muslims, and Muslims believe that they're taught by Allah to procreate. So it says the immense cruelty of what is happening to the Uyghur population demonstrates the inhumanity of China's 2-child policy, the urgency of combating the mindset that undergirds it. The way that the policy is enforced is influenced by prejudice against minorities, but authorities justify the policy when Malthusianism, defined as the fear that large population size could lead to a humanitarian or ecological disaster, and that combating so-called overpopulation is thus an urgent problem. The tensions between population and resources and environment will not fundamentally change, noted Chinese State Council and its National Population Development Plan for 2016 to 2030. Look at that. 15 years. 15 years. They look ahead for something like this. And let me tell you, people talk about climate change and pollution, all this stuff, and I have my opinions on that, but we got out of the Paris Climate Accord because it's stupid. It just taxes Americans, yet we have done more to reduce our emissions than any other nation. That is simply a fact. China does not care. They will continue to produce emissions as long as it gives them power and control, and they can build up their economy enough for their government to basically spread their Maoist utopia. Now, I know a lot of things have changed over the years, but I'm telling you, people, this is the real problem. So, this whole idea, too, that the Earth is overpopulated is just silly. There has been work done by this, or on this, by many people. Hans Rosling, who passed away a few years ago, but specifically Hans Rosling used to go around lecturing about this. He explained how eventually there will be a population cap, and the main reason is because as people become wealthier, as freer markets exist through capitalism, that you get essentially a lower birth rate. A lot of people talk about the declining birth rate in the West. Well, a lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't need children. We have birth control. A lot of that also has to do with high abortion rates in the West, which I find quite disturbing. But, that is how those things go quite often here. So, look, I'm going to start to wrap this up. I have a few more things. I'm just going to read these headlines for you here. It says, there won't be enough coronavirus vaccines for a return to normal life until 2020, WHO scientists say. This is the WHO, Susan. Wiki. This is the WHO. All right? Don't ban me. Don't ban my little YouTube channel. And I say like the Cromulans from Rick and Morty, show me what you got. Because this, of course, you're not going to have a vaccine, people. This is about control. This is all about control. In 1968, the United States decided it was going to rush out a vaccine for swine flu. And it cost them billions of dollars in lawsuits because of the neurological damage. You can look it up. It was on 60 Minutes. Educate yourself. Quit being a moron. Man. Like, I know I get aggressive about this, but man, quit, just being a sheeple. Understand that you were meant to have liberty. That the federal government was never meant to have this kind of authority or power over you. That's why the video I did the other day was about government guidelines on food and how wrong they've been, and probably killed dozens and dozens of people. Now, a lot of people don't care. They're going to eat what they want. I mean, if you have a sweet tooth, just be aware you're probably going to get diabetes eventually, and you're probably going to accelerate any sort of heart disease that you might have. I'm not here to tell you to be a perfect saint in everything that you do. What I'm saying is that the government, our government, is not intended to do such a thing. So, what else do I got here? Let me see. Okay, this is something I wanted to cover about our liberties and our freedom. This is from ABC News. It says, why exuberant Hong Kong protesters are waving American flags. President Trump signed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act on Wednesday. Now, this was back in November of last year when the protests were big time news. And these are pictures of, there we go. These are pictures of Hong Kongers waving our flag. They were singing our national anthem. Why? Why were they doing that? Well, that doesn't sound like our national anthem, but, I've seen videos of this. But why were they doing that? Well, the reason why they were doing that is because they believed in the Founding Fathers' spirit of liberty. It's what made Hong Kong the amazing place that it is, or was. And here we have the same thing from CNN News. Oh, China gifted propaganda win as Trump's protest response undermines U.S. efforts to protect Hong Kong. Okay, this was back in June. My mistake. I had my articles out of order. I think I was looking for this one. Yes. Beijing says Hong Kong protesters show signs of terrorism. If you agree, only watch the state media. You probably agree. Interesting that CNN would talk about state media, by the way, because they basically are the DNC's mouthpiece. So this was August 14th, 2019. And essentially, the Chinese government was saying that these are a bunch of out-of-control mobs beating up police, crazed separatists throwing petrol bombs and vandalizing government buildings, the symbol of the country insulted and humiliated. And CNN goes to say, well, you shouldn't believe the Chinese government. Yeah, okay, well, but you believe everything the WHO says? Get out of town, CNN. And here they go, well, yeah, this is more recent, obviously. China gifted propaganda win as Trump protested response undermines U.S. efforts to protect Hong Kong. Protesters run amok, innocent citizens under siege outside, actors engage in terrorist acts. Police struggle to maintain control, a desperate need of reinforcement. That's how the Chinese state media portrayed anti-government protests in Hong Kong last year, dismissing calls for greater democracy. Yeah, well, the riots in our streets, that's not what's going on over there. It's really simple, people. You just get on Twitter and you look at what citizen journalists do. You get on YouTube. You get on alternative media platforms. I would not for a second, be looking at mainstream news for much of any information. I would say, and this isn't because I lean right, but I would say Fox News actually does a good job, pretty decent job. When I turn on my TV, I almost never watch cable, but I have it because it's part of my internet package. But when I turn on my TV, I usually have it on Fox News because I immediately go into a smart app and then go into something else. Because on occasion, I'll watch Tucker Carlson on occasion. But it'll come up and they'll be talking in the day shows or whatever to Democratic strategists, Democratic Congress people. They'll be talking to all kinds of people of all sides, giving a fair perspective. If you go to a panel on CNN, you're going to get nothing but Trump bashing. That is their MO. That is what they do. Peter. They do nothing but Trump bash. And we're over here in the U.S. allowing riots and whatever else, calling them peaceful protests. And I know a lot of people are finally turning against this, but we're over here trying to praise these people up and CNN saying, well, they have the right to do this. Old Fredo goes, well, tell me where they're supposed to protest peacefully. Oh, let me tell you where. It's called the First Amendment. Peaceably assemble. Same reason why you have no right as a government to take away my business from me because of some virus that kills very few people. So I can't stand this stuff. This is what we're literally ignoring here in the United States while we want to talk about police brutality. And don't get me wrong, I'm all about police brutality, but right here it says PLM narrative backed by media.
Wait a minute. Peter didn't shoot my son. I did. Peter was just taking the blame for me. He's a good friend.
Mr. Brown, what exactly are you saying?
I'm saying that I, Cleveland Brown, a black man, shot Cleveland Brown Jr., another black man.
Wait, where did everybody go?
You want to make the media go away? Just mention black-on-black crime.
So, we can talk about police brutality all you want, but it doesn't really matter. I want to read this before I get off of here, though. It says, liberty must, at all hazards, be supported. We have a right to it, deserve it from our maker. But if we had not, our fathers have earned and bought it for us. You have no respect for your ancestors if you do not hold up these ideas of classical liberalism at the expense of their ease. And you have ease now, you weak, pathetic people. Their estates, their pleasure, and their blood. And now we have people out in the streets destroying all that. That joke from Family Guy, that is absolutely true. David Dorn, his wife was at the RNC, and it was heartbreaking and touching at the same time. He was murdered during the beginning of these riots. Nobody cares. We just keep talking about scumbags. Talk about Kyle Rittenhouse and the scumbags that he killed. Now, I don't think he should have been there. And I definitely, don't really believe that he should have been putting himself in harm's way like that. But those people were trying to blow up a gas station. And that's where the encounter, that's where it started. And he was backed into a position to have no choice. I think it's smarter to be concealed carry, but there are times to be open carried. But let's make no mistake. there was a crazy man with a knife in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I mean, sleepy little Lancaster, guys. And people started rioting. Now, fortunately, the police department there did the right thing, arrested the agitators and charged them and put them under $1 million bail. But, the DNC, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, they'll probably bail them out. So, man, it's so sick. It's just so absolutely gross. So, folks, before I get out of here, let me just plug a few things real quick, as I normally try to do. The Ends Justify the Memes. That is ends_justify memes over on DLive. Tonight I'll be on there live, 7 p.m. with my co-host Tank. We do it every Wednesday night, and then we have replays over here on YouTube. The Ends Justify the Memes. We do this because WikiWiki is quite horrible with censorship. Also, if you folks like to support me, go over to AllMinucOne on Subscribestar. I haven't actually even looked at this in a while, but I'm pretty sure I don't have any subscribers yet. So, but that's okay, because I have a very small channel. And, I'm doing this because I have the time to do it. And it's stuff I want to talk about, and it's stuff that you need to hear. So with that, guys, like, share, and subscribe as well. Help spread this word. Help get my name out there, or the channel's name, AllMinucOne. Make a comment. Help the algorithm grow. Let people know. Get away from mainstream news. Start opening your mind. Return to the principles of liberty. Start reading classical liberals in their writings. Look at some libertarian writings. Now, be careful about the big L libertarians, because they're a little crazy. I know I use some Reason magazines every now and again, or Reason magazine articles every now and again, but they are a little crazy. I didn't like how they portrayed Trump in the beginning. I wasn't sure about Trump, so I didn't vote. But, I hold a principled stance. If I don't know about somebody, or I'm not sure about them, I don't think they have a solid record, I don't vote for them. Amazing. But that's what you get when you have principles. So anyways, help me grow, guys. And with all that, be well.